Okay. The year 2022, a lot of twos, is about to wrap up. And that invites the opportunity to look back on all that has happened.
Indeed, and as always, we are going to pick our favourite interviews and episodes of the year,
while inviting you to tell us which were your favorites. We have discussed spaceflight science, mushrooms, of course, HIV vaccines, Alzheimer's disease, plastic-eating enzymes, genomic data, and so much more during the year.
It has been remarkable how much learning and interest and fun we have packed into just 12 short months. But it is time to choose our favourite moments from Discovery Matters over the last year. So, my favourite episode of the year was mycoprotein and cell-cultured seafood. We spoke with Tim Finnegan, the Chief Scientific Advisor of Quorn Foods.
You would pick an episode about fungi, no doubt. And we learned that Quorn started way back in the 1960s. The fungi used in Quorn Foods was found in a compost heap in a little village only a few miles from our Cytiva offices in the UK. Talk about one man's trash is another man's treasure.
So what really got me excited about this episode was all the interlinking between different parts of our company, our customers, and the future of therapies. Because not only was the fungus discovered close to our UK offices, the commercialization and industrialization of it as a food took place on a site which is now owned and run by a major CDMO, which is one of our customers that manufactures monoclonal antibodies in the northeast of the UK. So there was a lot of linking there between the past and the future of our organization and our customers that made me get excited about this episode.
We're harvesting the solids and not the liquid, but the start of it is something that's quite amazing because, if you've ever made bread or wine at home, you open your yeast sachet. That's kind of exactly what starts, what happens at the start of each fermentation run to produce mycoprotein. And those few tiny little spores of our production strain get brought back to life in a little bit of sugar solution and just sit there happily in about 5 litres until they get to a certain sort of growth concentration. And then they get put into the fermenter, which is about 160 metre cubed, 160,000 litres. So what a dilution that is, 5 litres. And there it sort of enters this what's called the batch phase, where it grows quite happily for about 4 or 5 days and quite rapidly actually up to a kind of a working concentration. And I think here's where the engineering magic happens, because not only is that done under very sterile conditions, because you don't want anything else in there but our little mycoprotein, but we're then able to hold it at that point of maximum growth and harvest at the same rate that it grows. And we can do that for something like 35 days until we stop, clean down and start all over again.
All right, so Tim is talking about growing and harvesting, and I'm just curious, how is your personal mushroom crop coping during these dark winter months?
You see, well, that's the marvelous thing about fungi. You can grow them inside in temperature-controlled environments. So it doesn't matter what's going on outside and whether it's light or dark. You can force your shrooms to do what you want them to do whenever you want them to do. They're a most amenable organism.
One of the things that I remember about one of the many episodes that we've done about mushrooms or fungi is just how basic they are to human existence.
That's exactly
Without fungi,
right.
we simply wouldn't be able to exist.
Exactly. And they have been lauded as potentially responsible for the very beginnings of, complex life on Earth.
Right.
The ability of plants to have soil, which was originally rock broken down by ancient fungi, and then the symbiosis of algae and fungi to form complex organisms. It's just a remarkable history about the evolution of life on Earth.
Okay, my turn. In May of this year, I got on a call with Jacob Mo Lange from California Cultured, and that was our episode on the future of GMOs, so genetically modified organisms. And Jacob was focused on chocolate. Now, I don't eat chocolate. I avoid it. But Jacob is devoted entirely to creating cell-cultured chocolate, a more sustainable version of the stuff.
And I found this absolutely fascinating because he was really looking at potentially something that you thought was something of a luxury. But obviously, when you dig into the supply chain, it really matters that we root out the things that make chocolate an environmentally and humanitarianly expensive product.
Absolutely. Now, we were on a video call with Jacob, and in the background, he had plants coming out of his walls. He was so passionate about life and how life survives in all kinds of environments, wherever you put it. And by saying there were plants coming out of his walls, I don't mean that he had planters, horizontally placed on his walls. They were actually growing out of his walls. He was surrounded by greenery. At the same time, of course, he is looking at how to simulate, how to create life in a lab environment. And he is not afraid of that. It's not even a conflict for him. He thinks that that is the future. Genetically modified organisms for Jacob is the way to advance science, and he really believes in the science so passionately.
This is a really challenging topic because as a scientist, I love GMOs. I think GMOs are the future. I think there's no future in which we survive and we're not all eating GMOs on a daily basis. That's the future, full stop. Because traditional breeding cannot keep up with the change in the climate. The rate is too fast. We need to be able to develop things much faster than we currently can. That said, people don't really want to eat GMO products. You can't change, you can't move mountains sometimes, and that's just the way it is.
I got the feeling that Jacob was sort of a little bit of a magical character, something of a wizard of plant life and engineering at a molecular scale. Absolutely fantastic listen.
So putting together our Discovery Matters podcast involves a few other members of the team. And so Beth, who is our content planner and does all the prep work and shares the research with us and puts together the show notes that I know you are looking at if you are listening, dear listener, we asked Beth for her favorite episode.
At the beginning of the year, we spoke with discovery maker Mustafa Bataye, who was at the time working as a postdoctoral researcher at the Jenner Institute, working on the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, obviously a really massive and important discovery. And his story took us from the Gambia to the UK to study microbial proteomics on a scholarship. And from there, he's continued to make truly amazing discoveries to human health globally. But what really drew me to his story was it was very personal. He gave us his really personal story on why he went into the field and why it matters so much to him that, there has to be equitable access to vaccines. And it was just a really beautiful story.
I lost my elder brother to measles, and the only reason why measles is no longer a major health problem in low and middle income country is down to the widespread use of the measles vaccines in those parts of the world through the expanded program of the WHO. So for me, it's down to a personal encounter I have in life and the impact I see in real life growing up that vaccines have in terms of improving child mortality in low and middle income countries, particularly in my country, in the Gambia.
What a great story there. And then, of course, last but not least, let's not forget about Tom Henley, who is our editor and has worked so hard this year to produce such polished episodes, irrespective of the quality of sound that we managed to record.
We make Tom's work very challenging.
He does earn his money, doesn't he? But he has a favorite too.
For me, one of the greatest joys of putting a Discovery Matters episode together is when I get to hear the history behind certain discoveries. Take our episode about wastewater monitoring, for example. There, Dr. Kate Farkas of the Bangor University in Wales gives us a comprehensive and fascinating insight into the history of wastewater monitoring, which kind of blew my mind.
Scientifically speaking, the surveillance of water bodies and wastewater have been going on for decades. The first studies that were comprehensive and really looked into this problem, I think, were the 50s and 60s. So ever since then, we know that there is this issue and there's something us scientists can do about it. For instance, wastewater-based epidemiology, which is now we use for COVID-19, not just in the UK, but all around the world. We've been using that for poliovirus surveillance for decades again. So it's not like a completely new tool. We just now have better systems and better processes and better ways to detect viruses and so on. But the concept is not new. Also, it can be used for certain chemicals or other pathogens too.
And it's time to introduce a new segment to our podcast, which you're going to hear throughout 2023. And Conor, it is based on your motto that every day is a school day. So let's talk about the best thing I learned this week. And we're going to share something that we read or watched or listened to that really grabbed our attention. So do you want to share something from your week?
So this week I have been listening to a new audiobook on my dog walks. It's by the renowned oncologist and cell biologist Siddhartha Mukherjee. It's called The Song of the Cell. And he has very clearly explained, and I think I understood this, but I've never had it explained to me quite so clearly, that actually almost everything that goes well or goes wrong for us in our health is something to do with the function or dysfunction of a cell. And those can be affected by things as complicated as the microbiome or as simple as lacking a particular capability to produce a protein. But essentially it all boils down to life, and all that goes well and all that goes wrong with it is down to cellular biology.
That sounds like a good read or a good listen.
But absolutely a fantastic read and a great listen.
I've also been listening, and because we are in the darker months of the year, it was, recently All Saints Day. I listened to the Smithsonian's podcast, which is called Side Door, about all the ghosts that are floating around the halls of the Smithsonian Institution. And it's quite marvelous because that is a highly regarded scientific institution in the United States. And the host of the podcast is going around asking people about the ghosts that wander the halls of the Smithsonian. So that was one episode. And she's a marvelous host, and she goes around really exploring all kinds of topics that give you backstory and extra color around things that are shown and preserved at the Smithsonian. I also want to mention that you and I shared a new experience this week in virtual reality.
We did, and that was absolutely extraordinary. And remember, you'd been in there a little bit longer than I had, and I think probably you'd been doing a lot more hard work learning to fit the flow kits to the chromatography system.
I did learn that.
And you got a little bit nauseous towards the end there.
I sure did.
And I thought that was down to
fact,
how used to the environment you might be. But you know what? When I hit about 90 minutes in that space, I also got a little bit nauseous. And it's that disconnect between what your body is doing and what your mind or brain thinks your body is doing that maybe leads to that weird, nauseous virtual reality feeling. I mean, how was it?
Well, I think we should invite our listeners to tune in to the episode that we're going to create of you and I going into that virtual reality environment. So that will be one of our episodes in 2023. We also have queued up episodes on CRISPR technology, underwater discoveries, ribosome toe printing. That must be one of your interviews, Conor, because I have no idea what that is.
It's exciting. The ribosome's such a marvelous structure inside the cell.
And brain cells playing computer games and so much more. It's going to be a fantastic year of Discovery Matters in 2023.
We look forward to a rip-roaring year with that. Have a fantastic end of 2022 and a happy new year. We'll see you when we come back.
Discovery Matters is produced with the help of Bethany Grace Armit Brewster, editing, mixing, and music by Tom Henley and Banda Productions. I am Dodi Axelson.
And I'm Conor McKechnie. Rate us wherever you get your podcasts, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.